Hello, I'm Cho, and I'm here today to discuss something near and dear to my heart and my career. As most of you will probably know, I'm a comic author and artist, and most all of my work is intended for mature audiences, just like my videos. What most of you might not know is that any creator, any artist especially, who isn't making what the straight mainstream would call family-friendly content has to struggle to even exist. And it's all because of sites like OnlyFans, Patreon, Pornhub, Tumblr, and so on. It's also in large part because of creepily super conservative puritanical assholes on social media like Twitter, also known as the absolute shithole of the internet and the worst of humanity. This isn't a politics issue though, and it's not to be polarized or polarizing. But I will say this before we begin. If you are for censorship, you're no better than the rash of conservative idiots who only give a fuck about freedom of expression when you're being silenced. So all the people in that incredibly stupid camp, go read your King James if you have the ability to read. I've said often enough before, artists tend to see ahead. They see forward, they challenge, and the best are usually not able to be appreciated in the time when they live. Artists tend to see the way things should be, which is of course never the way the things are, and as a result, any artist's life is a struggle. People don't understand you, they don't understand what expression means for you, and they don't understand that you really can't exist without it. It is as intrinsic to an artist as breathing is to most people. But they're not thinking. Because let's be honest, we wouldn't be here talking about this if more people actually bothered to kick that dormant organ into gear, sitting in their head in cobwebs. These sites are exactly like every other one that's come and gone, in that they built their whole company and profit model off the backs and shoulders of mature content and creators and are, as inevitably as I mentioned in a number of my other videos, finding that they think they're doing well enough to just basically fuck over all the people who got them where they wanted to go. Just like Smack Jeeves, Adult Webcomics, Tumblr, Tapas, all the sites that will basically eject anyone not vanilla and mainstream, then a year or two later post about their incredible journey as they're shuttering the site. Or in some cases, lose the majority of their actual user base and exist as a wraith-like husk of what they once were when anyone actually gave a fuck about them. And they all do the same stupid things, and they all think they're special and different and so much better than anyone who's ever done it before. These companies often try to justify their actions, demanding more and more of creators and gradually censoring them steadily more and more. They urge concerned users to contact them, then they claim that any such users are overjoyed and enthusiastic to work with them on their idiotic new policies. It doesn't matter if they really do have a pet demographic, an Uncle Tom, if you will, a Quisling crowd, but they want you to believe that if you disagree with their direction, you're alone. They want you to feel isolated, like you're unreasonable and unrealistic if you speak up or disagree in any way. It's very subtle, but you can pick it out if you learn to look for it. They want you to think that all those people who, like you, are using this site, think that the site is being run the best it can possibly be and all these policy shifts are a-okay with them and you should just put your head down and not say anything because shut up bitch, we own you. That's what it boils down to. The reason why this is so concerning, well, there are actually a lot of reasons why, but one of the major reasons why it has to be fought and these companies boycott it into dissolution is this. It's tantamount to passing laws against people existing. Laws do not make something right or wrong, nor are laws good in and of themselves, especially when they attempt to make people illegal. Gays, for example, have only this year received essential protections for employment, meaning that you could be fired for being gay and have no legal recourse until this year. Is that cool? Cannabis, an extremely valuable substance scientifically with tremendous potential uses for humanity as a whole, is still highly illegal in a number of places, even in the United States. Just to make you aware, in case any of you didn't know, cannabis is not chemically addictive, it is a potent anti-inflammatory and has tremendous positive effect as a part of treatment for a number of illnesses, including mental and emotional illnesses such as depression and anxiety. A number of studies, which you can totally look up online, have found extremely promising results when they were finally able to do any research with it. It was made illegal by outright lies, largely fueled by racism. So that's cool, right? Because it's a law, that means only bad people do it. Except bullshit, because after I've actually tried it, I found that like 99% of the people I know either have tried it in the past or take it regularly to this day. So yeah, laws are especially nonsense. And especially in this day and age where politicians are lazier and more spiteful than ever. They have the largest informational resource known to the human race at their fingertips, but they prefer to go on feelings and completely uninformed opinions rather than any fact or supported theory. Jaywalking is totally a made-up crime, and I'm talking historically and factually. It was made up to allow police to charge people arbitrarily and arrest or cite whoever they wanted. As with many things, it was largely made to target minorities and poor people. It's tantamount to walking while a minority, which is definitely why it's still in use today. Walking while black, walking while gay, walking while female. You can also call it jaywalking, because they're just going to use it in exactly the same way. And it's not like this doesn't happen. Naomi Grossman, for example, whom many of you will probably know from American Horror Story, had some asshole cop try to hit her with jaywalking. It happens all the fucking time. And jaywalking, like a lot of their transparent stunts, is one of the many things that they do to emphasize the message of "we own you" and "we control you." Just like people being abused due to their use of cannabis, or people being abused for happening to be gay, or of a certain race, or of a specific gender identity. So you can't justify discrimination and silencing because there's a law. If that were okay, nobody would ever have been able to get any rights ever except rich people of the most powerful ethnicity in any region. But they're not passing laws, right? Except that they're actually doing something worse. They're not actually passing laws. They don't have to. They're using their terms of service to silence people and ostracize them. Remember when I compared this phase of censor-happy bootlickers to Puritans? That's how their society worked, or failed to work, too. Anyone who didn't want to follow whatever arbitrary rules they decided God wanted for them, out you go. And, just like then, ostracizing people from the only means of being even remotely successful or even staying afloat is basically a death sentence. These sanctimonious assholes keep their hands clean by saying, "Oh, well, we didn't kill them. We just did everything possible to make it happen. God still loves us. We're still good." There are so many people who just give up and quit doing art, and it's in large part because of the massive discriminatory attitudes all over, largely motivated by greedy, lazy platforms and dishonest crusades. Just like the laws that they try to pass to help stop sex slavery and protect the children, it's just using something that sounds honorable to do something horrible. None of these things really ever help any of the people they claim to, which you can also find online. Check out the stats. These are the legal equivalent of establishing jaywalking as a punishable crime. It's inventing a perfunctory justification for shutting down anyone doing anything that a small group of people, woefully out of touch with the rest of humanity, decide is somehow objectionable. Patreon even has a term that tries to be shitty to anyone creating what they think is fringe. And of course I am using finger quotes. And fringe is every bit as vague and arbitrary as anything obscene, finger quotes again, being forbidden. This normalizes a form of shaming that encourages unity only to basically slag off the non-mainstream. To bring up my social status again, gays were and are still today part of the fringe in a lot of places. Encouraging people to treat others worse and justifying it because they're fringe is absolutely wrong. And it just leads to more discrimination. Even worse, it actively harms those cultures and groups, and for a classification completely vague and arbitrary. Fringe just means a whole lot not like us to the point where we consider it excessive. Which leads neatly to the next problem, and that is the mainstreamizing, to use a very American term, of minorities and minority groups. Our cultural identities are often too extreme or objectionable for the waspy mainstream or the imagined mainstream, as is usually the case. When this sort of thing happens, basically we are told as creators that we can only express ourselves and our experience as minorities in a way acceptable to the mainstream. Wouldn't want to go too far and be fringe. Let me be very plain with you here. Gays are very up with sex and sexuality. It's something that tends to be a big, important part of our lives and personalities because for so long we have been discriminated against horribly because we like guys. We created our own distinct society and culture, separate from the mainstream in the US and many other countries because we could not get basic human rights from them. And now you expect me to be totes cool with this same institution, or worse yet, some fucking 2-bit one-horse company coming along and saying I'm just too much of a giant faggot, and to tone it down because I'm scaring the straights and the basic bitches and the Karens? How about fuck you? How about fuck you instead? What I'm serving up is at least Dante's Cove level, but they're screaming that I have to deliver Will and Grace because they're scared of gay sexuality and naked people, largely because all of these people also can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy, which I think is one of the most important things that, for me, makes their entire position invalid and irrelevant. If you can't tell the difference between those things, get out. Don't talk to me, don't try and flex on me, and don't try and force me to not do art and not express myself. You are a fucking imbecile. And delusional. You can't apply rules from this world, especially ones so arbitrary as the ones they're always trying to sling around, to people and things not of this world. It doesn't work like that. Our standards today aren't even the same as they were in this same world, in this same country, 10 or 20 or 100 years ago. They're not the same as they were 5 years ago. It's incredibly arrogant, especially when the people doing it are as stupid as they are, to assert that we need to just adjust everything to whatever the mainstream or the political landscape or anything else volatile and ever-changing decides the moment needs. That's how we get laughable and embarrassing policies that very plainly retard the development of society and culture. You don't get to decide. No one does what is classified as fringe. That's a dangerous precipice to start edging toward, and I'm not ready to jump back in the closet and have to interact only with an insular and segregated culture. I'm especially not ready to accept one pissant group of idiots trying to accept their opinions and feelings on an international medium for all humans everywhere. Pornhub deleted countless videos because they weren't on certified accounts, their process for which is incredibly invasive of privacy and unpleasant. OnlyFans was ready to ban all their adult-oriented users, which they decided against because they probably realized that it was basically everyone who uses the site. Fuck them. Never trust them again because they almost did it and only stepped back for a moment. Which brings me to the next example. Tumblr. They did exactly what OnlyFans almost did, largely because they were lazy and cheap and unwilling to address the actual problem. Like YouTube and everything Google and wannabe these days, they wanted to use robots in ways robots cannot adequately function, so they wouldn't actually have to do the work. Then they decided that since their first lazy idea didn't work, they'd get rid of all the adult content. Brilliant! Since adult content was a huge part of Tumblr, which now sits as a shell of its former self. A place where no one with any integrity or even a sense of fun would set foot. It's a social medium that got rid of most of the social aspect in favor of what amounts to a gated community for people who only have things to say that would be acceptable to a decrepit boomer. And Patreon, who were created to facilitate convenient patronage for creators, a practice in art that has existed since there has been art, increasingly treat their site as if it were a shop, which it is not. They're now asserting that they're going to ask for scans of ID and consent documentation, which is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard of. But it's just like about 20 years ago when adult videos had to suddenly add a disclaimer that everyone was documented and it was all okay, which was also incidentally a stupid massive waste of time for everyone involved and accomplished effectively nothing but, say it with me, allowing a small group of people to silence and censor arbitrarily as they pleased. Allowing a small group of people to silence and censor arbitrarily as they pleased. ID? No thanks. Being gay is illegal in a bunch of places, as I mentioned before. I'm not scanning my government-issued ID for you. I'm sure as hell not gonna get a consent documentation because the only person being fucked here is me by places like Patreon, and my consent is apparently nothing they give a shit about. They also decided to give us a heads up less than 48 fucking hours before they intended to roll out the new policy changes and provided exactly 0 ways to challenge or even question these proposed changes. Drop by our Discord server does not cut it, guys. But more than that, are they fucking high? So, in the age of identity theft absolutely out of control, with massive leaks happening all the time, like just last week, Twitch, which is a major site with millions of users, had a giant and well-publicized leak. So in this age of possibly my entire identity and financial holdings being stolen by some asshole, Patreon of all people want me to be fine with their half-assed band of shitlords holding on to one of my major forms of identification. I don't show my ID hardly ever, and it has my address on it, my birth date, my signature, everything. It's a one-stop shop to steal my identity. And Patreon decided, because MasterCard insisted, that was the perfect way to just resolve this whole thing with the mature content. Except it won't. There is no possible thing that having scans of people's IDs can or will accomplish. It's just giving an irresponsible company who doesn't care about you enough information to either sell to marketers, which they will totally do, or just insecurely store somewhere and forget about until there's an inevitable leak and we all have to get new fucking IDs. Just like I've had to get a new bank card twice, not because I compromised my account in any way, but because the security of the card and the account weren't good enough, and through largely the fault of the card issuer, MasterCard, in case you're curious, my account details were stolen. Keep in mind, I take a lot of precautions when I use my card, and I did not use it anywhere outside the house for over a year. When I was discussing it with a manager from my bank, I was told that I was not the only one who had this happen. So, yeah, it was definitely 100% MasterCard's fault. And they want to hold on to even more of my personal info? No thank you. Fuck you very much. You're welcome. Fuck off. We must stand together and oppose any such actions, and if any company, site, or organization proposes anything along these lines, we must answer them with a firm no, and then never trust them again. Leave the site if you can, delete your account, or, if they're difficult to cut out completely, voice your disapproval, and greatly reduce your use of the site, app, or service. As I covered before, they may not be passing laws, but this may actually be effectively worse. It skirts a lot of legal precedent by establishing a unity of practice that essentially does make it de facto policy in society, and that includes all users of these platforms and services. It ends up being incredibly, tremendously, disgustingly discriminatory towards especially minorities and minority expressions of art and creation, and it silences an overwhelmingly large number of people, proportionally much larger in minorities. And frankly, I won't be silenced. I'm interested in hearing about alternatives, but I haven't found one yet. Subscribestar seemed almost promising, but its terms are just as fucked up, creepy, and questionable as Patreon's. Gumroad is like playing Minesweeper, except there's no AI and the mines are all on a random seed. Inevitably, you will be made unwelcome, and your ability to make money and survive will be taken from you because you're just too fringe. I urge everyone to please spread the word. Think about these things. Think about the practices of these sites, and don't patronize businesses. And these are all businesses, for profit, that prey on creative professionals and presume to dictate the terms by which they are allowed to create. Art must be free, and expression must be free. There is no place for Puritans in the future. There's no place for them now. There wasn't even a place for them when they actually historically existed. Nobody wanted them because they were a bunch of pearl-clutching killjoys who were so far up their own ass it's a miracle they missed Narnia. No form of wonder or pleasure was acceptable to them, and they lived their lives a miserable pack of joyless wraiths, deriving no happiness from life and making sure no one else could be happy either while they were around. Don't forgive, and absolutely do not forget what these sites, companies, apps, platforms, and plainly companies do and have done. Don't trust OnlyFans just because they backed off their plans to get rid of mature creators. They will eventually, because they were so close now. Tumblr did exactly the same thing. Don't trust Pornhub. They're a bunch of creepy liars who welcomed refugees from Tumblr, then turned around and screwed them up the ass and out of a home. Don't trust any of these people, but especially don't trust Patreon or MasterCard or least of all PayPal. These companies are discriminatory to the point of toxic bigotry, and they are all predatory. They do not respect you or any of their customers. We are a number to them. We are a bottom line. And as an artist, that is one thing I refuse to be for anyone, for any reason. I'll see you next time. You're welcome. Bye.